I'm going to introduce Lou. Lou serves on the advisory board of the Fair Time for Women Coalition, and she's a woman with multiple bleeding disorders that overcame barriers herself to get diagnosis and care. And she's currently a NICU nurse at her local children's hospital. So Lou, would love to have you come and share a little bit about your story.
I don't know if everybody got the same blurb when they registered that said about that it's, statistically 16 years from symptoms to getting a diagnosis, and the average age of diagnosis is 35. I've been quoted that for over 30 years. Hopefully it's, finally going to change. So I am 65 years old, will be 66 in June. I, as a child, lots of bruises all the time. What I know now were muscle bleeds and joint bleeds because I did gymnastics and track and field. At 11 years old, I started having GI bleeding, which went on for months and months. Now, if I get GI bleeding, take a dose of Factor and it's gone in a day or two. Started periods, had heavy periods. When I tried to talk to the doctor about it, they would say, well, how was your mother's? How was your grandmother's? Well, they were very heavy too. So then they say, oh, that's normal. But, they had hemophilia too. So then I had first child at 24 and wondered why I didn't have much bleeding because I was used to what my periods were. Now knowing that hormones make your factor levels increase with pregnancy. So I didn't have really, much problems with the first delivery or anything. My son had bleeding with his circumcision, took forever to heal. I kept questioning it, but then finally healed. And at 17 months, he woke up from a nap and wouldn't bear weight on his leg. And so they put him in the hospital. We're working him up for juvenile arthritis and osteomyelitis and giving him aspirin.
Enter your meeting ID.
Giving him aspirin and putting heat on it. And so it was a resident in the middle of the night was listening to my story of bleeding symptoms and said, let me do some, clotting studies on my son, and found out that he indeed had hemophilia A severe. And so then I was just labeled as a carrier. First, and then we went to the HCC to start his care. Back then, there was not genetic testing because they had not discovered the gene yet for hemophilia. So the testing for a woman was to do your PTT, the old barbaric test of, slash your arm and somebody sits there with a stopwatch and see how long it takes you to clot. They usually gave up after a while because it wouldn't clot. And that was it, and got maybe out of factor level. But so there wasn't the genetic testing. So forever I was just considered just a carrier. And then years down the road when that was available, then I did get the genetic testing to show that I had the same mutation as all my children. And then I was able, my other children, to look for that particular gene. But with not being diagnosed and still not treated right, I was still having lots of problems. So at 35 years old, I had an inguinal hernia. I went for my, pre-testing for that. When the anesthesiologist talked to me, he looked at my history and saw that I was a carrier for hemophilia. So he said, well, I would like to refer you to a hematologist before I okay you for surgery. So I actually got sent to Dr. Kessler at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., who then did these testing and said, no, you're not having any surgery right now. But I was only put on DDADP IV for the surgery, and that's all I was given at first. So I would still have problems. I moved to Texas, and I'm a nurse. I am not at a local children's hospital. I work at Baylor Scott and White Hospital, just for clarification of that. So I moved to Texas because I actually, now my second husband if anybody knows Ray DeToli, is also a hemophiliac because we met on the HFA board. So as a nurse in there, the HTC is at UT Southwest, which is not network. So I was only seen by what we were talking about before, the hematologist who's actually an oncologist. So my care has always been as good as whatever my knowledge is because I write my orders, he signs them. So was still struggling, and I did not get access to Factor until about 10 years ago that I can treat more regularly, and also found out from talking to other women's at women's retreats and stuff about Lystata or tranexamic acid, which has helped a lot with bleeding. Because even since a kid, I would bleed from just dental cleaning and just be yelled at that I mustn't be flossing right. So now at 65, I have joints that are bone on bone from joint bleeds that weren't treated when I was younger. A lot of arthritis, damage to my large intestine from the bleeding I had when I was a kid. So I want to see it that other, that it becomes that women get diagnosed earlier and get access to proper treatment. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Lou, for sharing your story.